Hello students, today we are going to discuss functions versus relations. A relation is a mapping or pairing of input values with output values. A function is a relation for which each input has exactly one output. The domain is the set of input values or the x values. And the range is the set of output values or y values. In order to determine whether a relation is a function, we are going to use function tests. The first function test is by checking the input/output values. The x values should not be repeated. The second test is the vertical line test. You use a vertical line across your graph, and this vertical line should not intersect the graph at more than one point at any given time. Now let's look at some examples. In this first example it says, consider the relation -2, -3, -1, 1, 1, 3, 2, -2, and 3, 1. The first question says, what is the domain? Well, we know that the x values are the domain, so we're going to just simply write our x values. -2, -1, 1, 2, and 3. The next question says, what is the range? We also know that the range is simply the y values. So go ahead and just write out all of our y values. -3, 1, 3, -2, and 1. Then it asks us, is it a function? We know that one of our function tests is by looking at your input and output values, and we know that if there are no repeated x values, that it is a function. And if I look at my x values, I have nothing repeated, so therefore yes, it is a function. Continuing on with example 1, it also wants us to represent the relation using a graph and a mapping diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this relation. So the first point is -2, -3. The next point is -1, +1, over 1, up 3, 2, -2, and finally 3, +1. So we did this using a graph. Now if we use a map, mapping is simply just stating your input values and mapping it to your output values. So my input values would just be my x values, -2, -1, 1, 2, and 3. And my output values would be -3, 1, 3, -2, and we have a repeated 1. So there's no need to write repeated values more than once. So go ahead and map. So it'd be -2 to -3, -1 to 1, 1 to 3, 2 to -2, and 3 to 1. In example 2, it wants us to determine whether the mappings are a function or a relation and explain. For mapping, I like to go ahead and just write out the ordered pairs. So I have -3, 2, -1, 3, 2, -4, and 4, -4. If I look at my x values, I have no repeated x values, so it is a function. And the reason is because there is no repeated x values. On the next one, I'm going to do the same thing. I have -2, -4, 1, -1, 1, 2, and 4, 3. If I look at this, I do have a repeated x value of 1, so therefore it is a relation, and the reason would be because there are repeated x values. In the final example, it states, given f of x is equal to 2x cubed plus 6 minus x, find f of -1. Essentially, all this is saying is, if x is -1, what is f of x? So all we're going to do is plug in a -1 wherever there's an x and find the value. So we have f of -1 is equal to 2 times -1 to the third power plus 6 minus a -1. So let's just evaluate this. We have 2. Anytime you cube something, you have -1 times -1 times -1. So that's going to be -1 cubed is -1 plus 6. And a negative becomes a positive 1. So 2 times -1 gives us -2 plus 6 plus 1. So our final answer is f of -1 is equal to